What is this? Why is it shaped like that? And who would ever want this thing? If you're thinking these thoughts, don't worry. I did too. And everyone I showed it to had nothing but confusion on their face. This thing is called the TourBox NEO. And if you like being productive, this Mr. Potato Head of a device is supposedly helpful for people who want to get their work done. Now here's a disclaimer. The reason why I'm making this video is because I got this device for free, and all I had to do was make this video in return. And the best part about it? I'm allowed to say anything I want. And as someone who usually doesn't like taking deals for two reasons, this amount of freedom must mean the TourBox company must be pretty confident in their products. And since this thing actually interests me as an artist and editor, what do I think about it? Is this thing actually useful, or is it just some cheap novelty, like some sort of overpriced fidget cube? To better understand this thing, let's look at the email the company representative sent me, paraphrased for your convenience. TourBox is a controller designed for painters, photographers, directors, and content creators. It's not just shortcut gear, it is something that improves your work experience. All in all, we want whoever sees the videos to feel that TourBox makes the whole workflow of editing more intuitive and efficient. Okay, so let's hone in on these two things. Saves time by being intuitive and efficient. What does this actually mean? If you're unfamiliar with shortcut gear, they are devices meant to simplify your workflow. They are a way to easily access keyboard shortcuts instead of contorting your fingers a certain way. Less time spent having your cursor wander your monitor, and more time doing the work you need to do. Other benefits include being more comfortable and occupying less space than a regular keyboard. So let's do a quick overview of this thing. The TourBox features 11 buttons of different shapes and sizes, alongside a knob, a dial, and a scroll wheel, all of which have a tactile click when pressed down. It weighs 300 grams, features rubber feet, and a skin-friendly rubberized coating. Here's how I personally position my hand on it, and here it is compared to a keyboard and mouse. This is the cable, and this is the other things that come with it. Beyond the hardware, you'll need to download software from the TourBox site to get this thing up and running. It comes preloaded with presets for Premiere, Photoshop, and Lightroom, meaning you can use these programs from the get-go. There's also presets for more programs such as Clip Studio, Sai, and Krita on their website. And if you want to set up shortcuts for other programs, you can do that too. With that out of the way, what do I think about it? I like it. I like it a lot. And it all boils down to how much shortcuts I can use compared to this remote. Now to give you some history with this thing, this remote acts similar to the shortcut buttons featured on most graphics tablets. The reason why they are there is because they are meant to access shortcuts, which is normally done through your keyboard. Due to how much space your graphics or screen tablet takes, using a keyboard creates an awkward drawing position while needing a lot of space on your desk. And if you only have a laptop, you have to resort to doing this. Both scenarios suck, so the macro buttons attempt to solve this issue. And as convenient as it was, the amount of buttons was never enough for me, even the 17 buttons on this remote. Now this issue can be solved by using the remote in tandem with on-screen shortcuts. While this worked, this had its issues. Annoyed by this, I went ahead and bought myself a Stream Deck, but I ended up just using my keyboard and standing desk configuration. This ended up working really well for me. But since I already had the Stream Deck, you may be wondering, doesn't this functionally work the same way as the TourBox? Yes, but here's the thing. It wasn't designed to replace your keyboard, it was designed to be a companion. While you can try, the mushy buttons, a lack of landmarks, the glare, and a bunch of other things makes solely using this for work feel awful. Which makes the TourBox and Wacom remotes fairly attractive, because replacement is the goal. The question then becomes, can these things really replace a keyboard? To help you visualize this daunting task, here's a list of keys and shortcuts that I use on Photoshop. And out of the two devices, the TourBox ended up coming out on top despite having fewer buttons. So how's that the case? It boils down to how it's designed. With the Wacom remote, it can only afford your thumb to do any of the work, whereas the TourBox allows me to hit a combination of buttons at the same time. By being able to use more than one finger, it opens up possibilities to activate shortcuts than the Wacom remote, even more so with the fact that the TourBox registers double clicks, which culminates in my left hand being able to almost access all of the shortcuts that I want. While I still needed to use some on-screen commands, I didn't need these shortcuts all the time, so having to access them with my pen isn't really an issue. And that can't be stressed enough. Look how small this is. There's two benefits to this. First, it's portable, and second, it can fit comfortably right next to your tablets. Hell, put it on your screen tablet if you want, which means you don't have to awkwardly position your hand or keyboard. And since they can be so close together, you can access your tablet's buttons without much hassle. So if the TourBox doesn't offer enough buttons, your tablet's macros are easily accessible. But okay, Urick, it may satisfy your shortcuts in Photoshop, but what if I'm someone who doesn't know any shortcuts at all? Is this only for folks who are super familiar with their programs? No, because the software presets have labeled their shortcuts. So if you want to find a shortcut, it's as easy as searching it. Or you can just record your keystrokes yourself. Super simple stuff. Add on the fact that there's extra parameters you can add to each button alongside macro functionality. There's quite a bit of customization that you can do with this thing. There's also this D-pad HUD showcasing the shortcut you've assigned to the buttons. And this helps out a lot when you're learning how to use the device. I especially love this thing because you can change its size and position depending on the program. Something I wish Wacom's on-screen shortcuts had. And the final cherry on top, the software will automatically switch profiles depending on what program you're using, from the Adobe Suite, iTunes, web browsers, and even OBS. So the TourBox has utility beyond productivity, like using the knob as a volume controller. But what about the overall feel? Like sure, I covered its capabilities so far, but how does it actually feel to use?
Nice.
The device itself is built like a tank and can't be moved easily thanks to its weight and rubber feet, and grip and discomfort isn't an issue thanks to the rubberized coating. As for the buttons, individually easily accessible for my resting position, and most button combinations are natural to use. You could even say it's intuitive. Ooh. Oh, and before I continue, here's a sound test. Thanks to the tactile feel of each button, using them is satisfying. And since each button has a unique shape, navigating the TourBox without looking is a breeze. And out of all the doodads on this thing, what I appreciate the most is this trio over here. They essentially let my right hand take a break for a bit. With all the clicking, dragging, and scrolling, long work sessions tend to cause fatigue or pain on my index finger. While not present at all during my drawing sessions, when it comes to editing, this becomes a concern. So having my left hand alleviate the stress by just simply turning a dial or using the scroll wheel, that's super helpful, especially in the long run. So given my praise of this thing so far, let's see how I use it in practice. Disclaimer, I don't see myself as an amazing artist or someone with the right opinion, so all I'm doing is reporting what I've personally encountered, and that means different people may have different experiences, so please expand on your research if you can. So here's the little project I've given myself. I revisited an old webcomic of mine, since it'll cover just about every type of work I do on Photoshop. So by using work and characters I'm familiar with, I can solely focus on how I use the TourBox. Oh, and I'll also be editing this video with the TourBox too. And since I'm writing the scripts before I make the video, here's a summary of my impressions. So after around 4 hours of sketching and finding which setup makes sense to me, I finally found a configuration that I'm comfortable with. So while there is a learning curve, that's just about present in every macro device. Needing time to readjust is completely normal. You can see it in these doodles of mine as I become more confident in my lines in each iteration. So once I became comfortable using the device, I went ahead and started the project. And it worked great. From sketches, inking, colors, and painting, my most frequent shortcuts I needed were easily accommodated. There were no hiccups, for the most part. The thing that became an issue in my particular case was having to work with text. It's a big part of my work, be it in my videos or in my illustrations. And since the TourBox is meant for shortcuts, you can't completely tuck away your keyboard if your workflow requires actually typing things out. So when it came to playing around with sentences, it was just more comfortable for me to keep my hand on my keyboard during this stage of the webcomic, especially when I had to convert the comic for both Instagram and Webtoons. But let it be known, this is not a fault of the device. It's the nature of what the work requires. No matter how many buttons a macro pad will have, it will never beat a keyboard with a full set of alphas. Want to keep your layers organized and labeled? You're gonna need a keyboard. So if text is an integral part of your work, then you gotta keep this in mind. But since I can't blame the TourBox for this, let's talk about my complaints with the actual product itself. While I initially praise the button combinations that the TourBox offers, there's something about it that bothers me. Why can I only use 2 buttons at once? Why can't I do 3? I can do this combination or this combination with my fingers, but neither of them are present in the software. Being able to use several buttons at once is the reason why I like the TourBox over my Wacom remote. So the extra functionality would have been great to see. I can imagine hitting the side and top button at the same time while using my thumb to hit the D-pad. That's another 4 shortcuts I could use. And even if we're just talking about 2 button combinations, some combinations are not present for some reason, like the side button with the C buttons. This feels natural to me, but for some reason the software doesn't accommodate for it. Had these combinations been accounted for, maybe the TourBox could have accommodated every shortcut I use. But since it covers all of the shortcuts I use frequently, it's not that big of a deal, especially when an update can give us more options. And if you need more buttons, your tablet's macros or on-screen shortcuts can solve that issue for you. And while I wish I didn't need to use on-screen shortcuts, I'll be happy to use them if they're used infrequently. And the TourBox allows me to avoid it a lot more than the Wacom remote. And for people who aren't all that aware of their software shortcuts, the TourBox is probably more than accommodating for your use case. In fact, it accommodated my needs for Animate, Audition, and After Effects. So if you like how this video was edited, most of it was done with the TourBox. And that's pretty good to me. Okay, now for a lightning round of complaints. Some major, some minor. Presets. For a product aimed at creatives, I'm surprised the TourBox site has no presets for animators. No Toon Boom, TV Paint, or Adobe Animate. That means people who use these programs are gonna have to manually put in the shortcuts themselves. Oh, and remember this asterisk? Let's dive into it now. While I did praise the search feature, some of the website's presets for certain programs have a scarce library. A lot of shortcuts are missing. Just compare the Audition preset to the Photoshop preset. Deselect isn't even a thing. Sure, you can record the shortcut yourself, but that's not the point. Having a library ready to go is great because not only is it convenient, but it teaches newcomers shortcuts that they've never seen before. So yeah, it's unfortunate that some presets are more fleshed out than others. The rubberized coating. I like it because of the grip and feel, but it does get stained by your hands over time. This is not that hard to clean, but it will be bothersome for people who prefer things to look neat all the time. More dial options. A toggle for acceleration, or maybe a slider to show how fast or slow you want it. While there is a slow function, I'd like the software to expand on this further. This big ol' knob. Due to the knob size and position, your hand could accidentally scrape it when navigating the TourBox. Not that big of a deal and you'll get used to it, but I just wanted to let you guys know. The knob and dial button. Every button on the TourBox feels great except for these 2. They're functional, but they're too stiff to press down naturally, which leads me to rarely using them, if I ever do. It's not ambidextrous. The TourBox is specifically made to use for your left hand, so if you wish to use this for your right hand, it won't be as comfortable or as usable, which makes the Huon keypad and Wacom remote more attractive if you draw with your left hand. Right to repair. There's no easy way to open this thing up. If I were to guess, there are screws underneath the rubber feet. And if they are there, I don't want to damage my device in order to access its internals. The reason why I bring this up is because I'd like to be able to repair or mod this thing. Why buy a whole new device when you're able to fix it yourself, you know? More HUD options. Similar to the D-pad HUD, I'd like to see other buttons get the same treatment, allowing me to turn off and on the visibility of the buttons I want. Forgetting the shortcuts we've made ourselves is common, and having a reminder on screen as an option would be great. While there is a window that does this, it'd be neat if there was a way to present it similar to the D-pad HUD. Something that's discreet and something that doesn't occupy the screen as much. I'd also like an option for the HUD to be open for some programs and not others. I don't need it present all the time, so yeah, give me that. This is not a complaint, but a suggestion. Make the TourBox wireless and make it iPad compatible. This would be nuts. Anyway, if any of these things get updated, I'll let you know in the comments or in a Google document below. Now, having said all that, should you get one? Cause like, if you're gonna be spending money on this, you better buy it knowing it suits your particular needs. And at an asking price of $159, which takes into account the $10 discount when you use code Saladbar, you might be asking yourself some questions. Like, is the convenience and comfort worth the price? That depends. Let's look at the competition for comparison. Check out other brands like Razer, Monogram, Plank, Loupedeck, and the others. Hell, why not use your game controller? These options range from more expensive than the TourBox to literally free. So do your research and compare what the market is offering and see if it fits your use case. While I can make an educated guess as to why I'd prefer the TourBox over other options, that's all I can do. Guess. Because my lack of experience creates a blind spot in my judgments. And this limited scope has its faults. I think DankPods explains this best.
I don't want to make vids that stink, and no one wants to hear a review from someone who's like, oh, these are the only headphones I've ever tried, go and buy them, Amazon link down below.
So when you're looking to a reviewer for an opinion, make sure they actually know what they're talking about, watch multiple reviewers of the same thing and of similar devices. See what they have to say about it.
You know me, I like to be 100% honest with my audience, and this thing it's kind of eh.
Doing research is just best practice, you know? Instead of blindly buying something because I told you to, I'd rather have you make a conscious decision in your purchases. And having gone through that process myself because I saw folks on Twitter advertise this thing, here's my honest opinion. While I honestly think it's a great device, I personally don't need it. Earlier in the video, I mentioned this device is great for folks who don't have a comfortable position to use their keyboard. And it turns out I was lucky enough that I found a setup that I can reach my keyboard with ease. And if we look back at the claims of the TourBox making you faster and more efficient, this stems from the assumption that you probably can't access your keyboard shortcuts. But since I could already reach my shortcuts with ease, I didn't see an improvement using the TourBox for drawing. It was more like a side grade. And that's pretty great. Since everyone has different rooms, tables, and equipment, what works for me may not financially or physically work for you. And thankfully, the TourBox covers a wide range of use cases and scenarios. While I personally don't need the TourBox for drawing on my home desk, this would be a great device when I need to do portable work. And don't forget the fact that the dials are super useful to me. If it makes my hands hurt less during editing, then yeah, I'm gonna use it for that particular use case. So even if I'm not gonna use this thing for drawing at my main workstation, this device is still useful to me. So having said that, make sure you're only purchasing the TourBox if you can honestly say to yourself that you'll benefit from owning it. Because here's the thing. This device, and others like it, won't immediately make you a better artist. Instead of spending the time putting in the work, people tend to daydream about how good their art would be if they just had this, or that, or insert whatever you have in mind. Try not to fall into this trap. Use what's around you and never feel like you need to upgrade all the time. I've been using the same keyboard and mousepad since high school, remnants of my StarCraft 2 days. If you can, just practice and learn how to practice. One step at a time, that's the only way to improve. And these gadgets only streamline the process. They aren't required to make art. Just look at the character designer for the Persona series. Sojima draws with a Wacom Intuos 3, a device whose specs are worse than most tablets today, but his dated gear isn't holding him back. Have you seen Kiki Flipnote's animations? Dude produces crazy good stuff on a DS. And here's somebody I found on Twitter. They do a lot of their art entirely with a $50 LG phone from Amazon. And they don't even use a stylus. They just use their finger. If you like what you've seen, expense isn't required for good art. So don't ever feel the need to afford gadgets like the TourBox. Okay? Anyway, time to conclude this video. To finish this video off, let's revisit the email the company sent me. Does the TourBox improve my work speed, and does it make me more efficient? As someone who has found a way to use my entire keyboard, no it doesn't, but I can imagine the TourBox reaching similar speeds. And going from a keyboard with 5 extra keys to this small package, that's pretty impressive, which makes the TourBox preferable over the usual awkward keyboard setups. Alright, next one. Is it more intuitive than a keyboard? Yeah, actually. Would you prefer performing a shortcut this way or this way? Also, the buttons are satisfying, it feels natural to use, and the dials feel great whenever I'm scrolling a timeline or zooming in on the canvas. And since it alleviates stress on my right index finger, I'll probably use the TourBox for future editing projects. And not only is the hardware intuitive, but the software as well. So while I have benefited from using the TourBox, will the same be true to you? If you're someone comfortable and familiar with your setup and performing shortcuts isn't a hassle, then no, it's not. But if you're someone still pecking at their tablet, wasting time navigating menus when you could be gliding through your workflow with macros and shortcuts, then the TourBox helps out a lot. But maybe you're not in the market for optimizing your workflow. Maybe you just want the drawing experience to be more comfortable. Is accessing your keyboard shortcuts awkward? Are your tablet's macro buttons not enough? Do you have barely any desk space to work with? Or is using your laptop keyboard not comfortable? Then the TourBox is great for you. So all in all, what the company actually said to me was kind of right. If the following applies to you, the TourBox will make you faster and more efficient whilst being intuitive. And when compared to the rest of the market, this thing is priced right bang in the middle. So if you think the TourBox would genuinely help you out, a link to purchase it is down below. It's an affiliate link that supports me, and if you use the code Saladbar during checkout, you get a $10 discount. So yeah, use that if you want to sweeten the deal. But if you wish to support me financially but don't want to buy the TourBox, check out my Patreon. A single dollar will give you all this stuff, and higher tiers will give you even more. Don't feel obligated though, only spend what you can afford. This goes for both the TourBox and my Patreon. Anyway, that's it. Thank you for watching.